This is Flashes of Insight. Let's talk about liturgy after COVID-19. My name is Joe Grayland, and I'm talking with Tom O'Loughlin, Professor Emeritus of Historical Theology at the University of Nottingham in England. Tom, during the lockdown, we saw the use of online masses with many bishops and priests, often alone or in small groups, presiding in empty churches and cathedrals. I remember watching one in Ireland where there were 4 priests celebrating, and the cantor, who was a woman, and the musician, who was a woman, neither of them participated beyond that. The clergy read the readings, and when it came to communion, the 2 women didn't participate either. So I'm just wondering, do you think this response by clergy was reasonable?
No, I don't. I think we are now amazed by what we've just seen. But of course, if you had gone into any church in 1965, or indeed in many places until the mid-70s, what you saw there would have been absolutely standard. And the normal expectation of people was that they just went into the church and Mass was taking place. And we've actually reverted to pre-Vatican II thinking when what seemed the mere practicalities of the new rite suddenly became difficult. That really is seeing the Eucharist as something that priests do. It's some sort of quantum of divine energy.
I'm
It's
just
an
wondering.
object.
Sorry?
It's an object, but the Eucharist isn't an object. The Eucharist is an activity of a community. So even the fact that community was there and those women didn't participate, what was going on there?
Well, that's the question, I suppose. So in the end, would you categorize these as private masses celebrated in public, or as public masses celebrated in extraordinary times?
No, they're private masses celebrated in public. You can watch someone celebrate Mass on video.
Okay.
But you can't actually participate in a meal over. This is why I love that phrase that I saw on a lorry in France a few years ago. He was defending the fact that you need a logistics industry. You can't send an apple by email.
No, you can only put it on the back of a truck.
That's a basis. That's a you know that line in Star Trek, I can't change the laws of physics, Jim. Well, this is one of those laws of physics. If it's about eating and drinking together, you can't do it over the internet.
It's reality, Jim, but not as we know it.
Exactly.
But the other thing is that when trying to understand the difference between real and virtual, others have said that it is real, but its reality is in a different way. Virtual, when I read the definition of it, means that it is real, that it's in a different way. So in terms of what is virtual, what is real, what is physical?
Okay, I can watch you celebrate the Eucharist in your church. I can use what I'm hearing and seeing as a spiritual reflection, and a very good spiritual reflection. I might listen to the Eucharistic prayer in a more profound way than I would if I were in a church and were conscious of how uncomfortable the seat was. I might suddenly, because I can stop you, and if it's a recording, I might be able to stop you and think, now what did he mean with it? And then play it again. But that's not the same as taking part in the Eucharist. That is using the words and the vision of the Eucharist as a source of meditation for myself. Now that's a very different thing from saying you and I are actually participating in the Eucharist. And the funny thing is, over 40 years ago, Karl Rahner, the great German theologian who died in 1984, he was, when the first televised celebrations of the Eucharist were taking place, Rahner actually said, don't confuse seeing something with a whole human engagement. And Rahner was 50 years ahead of themselves. We had, but you see, it's interesting to think, why did we think we could film it? And indeed, in some places, they filmed it on a Saturday and then played it again, because we had a notion that the way one participated in the Eucharist was by observing. You observed, you waited for the bell, you waited for the cues, you watched, and you very rarely did anything else. Then in the 70s, 60s and 70s, television came along, and we shifted that. But we shifted the technology, but we didn't shift our understanding, and we didn't understand a weakness in a theology now isn't fixed by changing the technology. And now we've changed the technology again, but the theology is still very weak.
It is. Tom, there's, just before I invite everybody to put in your questions, and there's some very good material that's come out of the Archdiocese of Melbourne, which is about re-emerging with purpose. And at the end of that work, there's various pieces to that work. But they ask in one area, what do you keep? What do you change? What do you let go of? Because as we re-emerge, what are the things that we need to change more radically in order to celebrate liturgy as it is understood? I mean, how does it become the liturgia of the people?
I think the COVID has forced the rate of change in the church to accelerate, and it has, by doing that, we've become very much aware of change. But I think all the changes that are being brought about by COVID and all the problems that COVID has raised have actually been lurking there for years, but suddenly we've become aware of them. And it's only when change becomes a little bit more dramatic that we see it. The answer is we won't know for several years what is the best way to respond to this change, because these are profound changes. They didn't just emerge in February, March, or April 2020. They've been building up, some of them for centuries, many of them for decades. And what we have to do is to say, it's not a case of resuming. It's not going back. This is a chance for real renewal, a renewal of how we understand, and then a renewal of how we do. So there's going to be no quick fix. We like the idea that we can just put sellotape on the problem, or maybe it's a problem of buying new segregating ropes and all that. My inbox has been bombarded for the last 2 weeks with a new electronic collection thing, which I'm assured will take up contactless collections, is quicker, more efficient, and it even comes with a built-in hand sanitizer, so everyone move it along the thing. It's like, I'm sure if you're terrified about losing your collection, this contactless collection box is the answer. You know, it's best thing since sliced bread.
I'm glad you're thinking like a parish priest.
Yeah. Once in the business, always in the business. So the thing is, but
that's right. That'll be the new transition.
But the thing is, it's not a case of finding fix-its. It's the first task is to say, what are the big problems? And say, these problems have been around for a long time. And we tend to slip them under the carpet, or we tend to think, oh, well, we'll just change the rubrics.
Yeah. I've got two last questions here. One from T. Byrne. That's Tom, I think, isn't it? And it's, watching football can feel like being there, especially if you're with some friends. Watching the liturgy doesn't. Why are these two experiences different? You probably already mentioned it, but just very briefly, what would be the difference?
I think the reason is that, to a large extent, the experience of being in a football stadium is already a spectator thing. But it's one thing to watch football on television. It's another thing to get a ball and go for a kick around.
Right.
And real participation, full participation, is being out there on the playing pitch. We're supposed to be on the playing pitch when we celebrate the Eucharist, not spectators. We do actually have a special category of spectators, the catechumens. They're supposed to be but even they're not even supposed to spectate the liturgy of the Eucharist. So the reason is there's the people playing, then there's the people in the stands, and then there's the people who can't be on the stands. But the people who can't be on the stands are doing everything they can to have as close an experience. So it's a growing, it's a slide.
Yeah,
but
a growing experience.
The liturgy is not about watching the football. It's about getting out there with a football and playing with your friends.
That's right. There's a beautiful phrase in the rite of Christian initiation of adults that a catechumen joins the household of Christ. And on that, Alan has raised a question that a lot has been slightly negative. So what are the positive ideas and messages you see that might come after the COVID crisis?
I think the positive is that an awful lot of people have rediscovered ways of praying which are new to them. I think an awful lot of people have discovered the importance of the liturgy of the word, which they're celebrating in communities.
Yeah.
I think it has also raised the whole issue of, for a year ago, if you said, hey, let's have a discussion about the role of the experience of Christian community, very few people would have taken it seriously. Now we're talking about it. These are all positive things, but let's not kid ourselves. It's negative because we've responded fast, and some of the thinking was so fast that it doesn't bear thinking about at all. If you remember back in March, the biggest question was, that pointing out, bishops were pointing out, you didn't need a congregation for the validity of the Eucharist.
That's right.
Now that's a sort of silly thinking of people who live in a world of canon law. They don't live in a world of how human beings interact and how human beings pray.
This is Flashes of Insight, and we've been talking about liturgy after COVID-19.